Tomorrow, 150 people will join Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam in a dialogue session aimed at ending 3 months of protests in the city. The participants were chosen at random from a list of nearly 20,000 who indicated they wanted to take part.
Now, for more on this, let's head to Afifa Arifin. She's in Hong Kong for us. Afifa, how is this dialogue session going to play out?
That's right, guys. I'm here outside of Queen Elizabeth Stadium in Wan Chai, and this is the location where tomorrow's dialogue between Hong Kong's Chief Executive Carrie Lam and 150 people are set to take place in the evening from about 7 to 9 p.m. Right now, though, there are no preparations going on just yet. It's quite empty outside the stadium, and that could be because there's actually an event that's going on inside, a concert with various performances by many artists in celebration of China's 70th anniversary that's set to take place on October 1st. But we do know that security measures are expected to be quite tight here. There will be bag checks conducted. Participants will not be allowed to bring in items such as umbrellas, helmets or gas masks. Now, these are tools that are often seen being used by protesters at the various rallies we've seen happening in Hong Kong over the last 3 months or so. We also know that preparations could start as early in the morning. We hear that schools in Wan Chai, for example, will be closed, and other schools in Hong Kong, they are planning to cancel some of the after-class activities in anticipation of possible disruptions ahead of the dialogue sessions. But exactly how these dialogue sessions will play out and what sort of issues will be raised, well, that's something that we have to see when the dialogue starts. Mrs. Carrie Lam and the government themselves have said that this is a platform for the people to sort of vent their grievances. As you guys have said, 20,000 applicants applied for it, but only 150 people were randomly selected. Those people would have known by now whether they are selected or not, but not all of them will be given a chance to speak. That's because of the short 2-hour duration. In fact, there will be another round of a random selection tomorrow, and those who will be chosen will be given up to 3 minutes to speak. We also hear from the local media that 4 government officials will be joining Mrs. Carrie Lam, and these 4 officials were also part of the crisis talks with student leaders during the Occupy movement back in 2014. So the government is quite hopeful that the dialogue session tomorrow will be quite fruitful. But of course, critics are quick to point out that, the dialogue sessions will have very little impact in terms of resolving this political crisis. That's because they say a public dialogue is 2 hours is too short a period, and also protesters have been quite adamant that they want all 5 of the key demands to be met.
Yeah, speaking of the protesters, Afifa, some have ignored the dialogue session altogether, and they say that their demands are already very clear, as you mentioned. Can we expect any pushback, though? You mentioned that it's still unknown if there will be any sort of concerns or any protests tomorrow.
Well, I think the authorities are anticipating some sort of pushback, given some of the security measures that they are planning to implement tomorrow. Mrs. Carrie Lam herself has said that she hopes that this first community dialogue session can be conducted in a rational, peaceful and calm environment. But we do know that protests here in Hong Kong have entered the 17th week now with no end in sight. We've seen violent confrontations happen week in and week out. Many of the protesters have rejected Carrie Lam's olive branches, including the full withdrawal of the controversial extradition bill. Many of them say this dialogue would bring about little or no change, and the radical protesters are still adamant that they will take to the streets. This is why observers say that this stadium could very well become a target where protesters could gather tomorrow when the dialogue session happens. In fact, we are hearing that people from the social services sector are planning to form a human chain around the Wan Chai MTR station, which is quite nearby this area. So that's something we have to look out for tomorrow, whether this stadium where the dialogue is going to happen could become a potential flashpoint or confrontations between protesters and the authorities.
Yeah, another busy day in Hong Kong for you, Afifa. Thanks very much for that. Afifa Arifin speaking to us from Wan Chai in Hong Kong.